I do not claim to have perfected an art, but to have commenced one, the limits of which it is not possible at present exactly to ascertain. William Henry Fox Talbot, or Foxy to his mates.
I call him Billy H.F. Talbot.
Welcome to the Outerfocus podcast. Okay, so we have Joao de Medeiros from, is that right? De Medeiros?
Yeah, it's cool, it's cool.
Yeah, cool. Joao from Portugal with us this week to chat about stuff. We will have a talk to him later on in the podcast, see what he's up to, ask him what he does, why he does it, and his hopes and dreams for the rest of his life, maybe all that kind of stuff. We'll dig into that. I'll go through a little housekeeping and thoughts from our first episode. We're still trying to figure this thing out a little bit, and undoubtedly we're going to make mistakes, and I know there was a lot of umming and erring and vagueness, and I'm sure that will get better in time. Kind of, as I said to Bradley afterwards, since I stopped teaching, my brain's kind of turned to mush, and I can't recall the information, and I'm not, because I'm not, I suppose, in the history of photography, constantly, it's a case of you don't use it, you lose it. Yeah, absolutely. But as Bradley said, it's probably just old age. Or maybe I've always been like this. I don't know. Maybe I try and get, if any of my old students listen, then maybe they can back me up to say that I was far more fluid than I am now.
They say the first step to a solution is recognizing that you have a problem.
I don't have any problems.
Indeed.
I have no problems. Right. But I mean, to get this started, our concern was if we didn't get it started, then it would never happen. And we also knew that it wouldn't be a polished product right out of the box. So get it started and we can improve in time. I suppose it's the same as any venture, really, at becoming a photographer. People think that they can start being a great photographer, and it turns out that all they have is a lot of style and no real substance. So we're hoping to build our podcast from the start and get better in time.
And then we can teach. We can do a podcast workshop.
Yeah, we can podcast. We can teach podcasts. But there are workshops that teach how to workshop.
I
think there is one.
Yeah,
I think there is.
That's a little too circular for my brain.
To teach photography workshop.
There is such a creative live or something. They have it. They have it for sure.
It's excellent. I love it. Then we have a workshop on teaching workshops on how to teach workshops.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous situation to be on. We don't want to be it. Okay, so we know some of the information was a little vague too, and again, we're trying to find the right balance, and we're not wanting the introduction of the photographers or the photographers that we talk about to be an in-depth analysis. We want it to be a bit lighter than that, and just a short introduction really to pique your interest and to lay the groundwork for your own discovery, your own learning, and to create a discussion. And last week we touched on the beginning of what we now know as photography. De Geer with his relatively small camera obscura, light-sensitive plates, and that process was developed with the ever-shunned and forgotten Joseph Nicephore Niepce, who hasn't really had recognition for many things in his life. And I also mentioned that Chuck Close made some daguerreotypes, photographed some celebrities, and said that they were made for Vogue. It wasn't Vogue magazine, it was W magazine. And he photographed his kind of friends, other artists, and there's pictures of Brad Pitt, Kate Moss. And if you want to see more of those, you can go to Real Photo Blogspot, where there's some more information about that. And there's also Chuck Close's book, which is called A Couple of Ways of Doing Something, which I think you can get for about £45. Good book. So, as I mentioned last week, the camera obscura can be traced back a few thousand years. But to be able to make and fix an image didn't really happen until the 1830s. In 1839, Daguerre announces to the French Academy of Arts that he's invented a new photographic process called the daguerreotype. And within weeks, William Henry Fox Talbot announces, or should we just refer to him as Foxy? Yeah.
Or Talbot.
Fox Talbot.
With a mix of brevity
if you can bring that music by Jimi Hendrix, Foxy later.
Yeah. We'll do that. I'll put
you
Foxy.
can address him as Foxy. I don't mind.
Cool. So he announces his process, which is the Calotype. From what I understand, it was originally named the Talbot type. It sounds a bit silly.
Yeah, Talbot type.
Yeah. But I mean, would we think of it any different? It would just be the norm now, wouldn't it, if it was called the Talbot type?
So many things could have gone a different direction.
Yeah, indeed.
Anyway, the Calotype. So I found an article on the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it starts like this. A young English gentleman on his honeymoon sat sketching by the shore of Lake Como in early October 1833, one eye pressed close to the camera lucidia. With a simple draftsman's aid consisting of an adjustable metal arm fastened at one end to the artist's sketchbook or drawing board and supporting a glass prism at the other, the young man saw a refracted image of the Italian landscape superimposed as if by magic on the pages of his sketchbook. It seemed a simple task to trace the features of the village buildings, lake, and distant mountains with his pencil. But alas, it only seemed simple, he later recalled. For when the eye was removed from the prism, in which all looked beautiful, I found that the faithless pencil had only left traces on the paper melancholy to behold. And that young man grew up to be Taylor Swift. No, that was our friend Foxy. Well, I think it's quite hilarious that the first ideas of photography and making images with light and lenses and without actually drawing with paints and pencils and things like that was at Lake Como.
Yeah. I see where you're trying to get. Yeah.
It's like, man, if that was today, the landscape would be just full of couples and photographers.
Wedding photographers.
Instagramming themselves.
Yeah.
What's interesting in Talbot and Daguerre, they don't view photography as an expression, an art.
Right. Yeah. It was a
people
way
think
of,
society today think that digital is always moving, but in reality, back in the old days, in beginnings, photography was in constant innovation, different process, different people, always changing. You couldn't invest in any format because it was, in 5 years, they will change everything,
Yeah, absolutely. So it went from like kind of paper to, I think the daguerreotype died out quite quickly after the processes for paper negatives became,
even Talbot.
easier.
I think Talbot lasted for 10 years, 15 years.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, it's. I think Talbot's main improvement of the process was some of the same stuff that we've seen since then and today, and that's making things faster, exposure times reduced, the printing time,
reproduction times, and
Yeah. So
I think the selling point from at least what I read was the fact that you could make multiple copies.
Yeah. Whereas the
Daguerre was
just one.
Yeah, Daguerre was one, but with Talbot you can make books, and that was groundbreaking.
Yeah. And Talbot spent the last years of his life perfecting the the photogravure. I know exactly what it is as well.
He was trying to make.
Don't use it.
Sorry,
you
Bradley.
Just not use it.
He was trying to make. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was trying to make a kind of a National Geographic of architecture and sculpture and nature around Britain.
Yeah.
And France. I think the big project was in France, but he didn't have the funds.
Right.
Was that the story?
I think he went to, was it the French Academy of Art, and asked for a load of money for that? And they said no.
I think that was the case. Yeah.
Yeah, and they kind of went, no, we're okay. We don't need your paper process.
Because these guys look at photography as an illustration and not painting with light like we see today.
Yeah.
It was an illustration.
Like we talked about the diorama.
Yeah.
was trying to make more efficient images for the diorama because painting them was
laborious,
labor intensive. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's kind of that's right. But if we look at like the paper process really took over, but then obviously we had collodion wet plates and glass, and then glass collodion wet plates were a kind of a bridge between the two. They had the sharpness of they had more sharpness than the kind of paper negatives, quality. But they were really good quality, and you could reprint from them. And it was obviously Talbot who realised that he could shorten the exposure times by chemically treating the paper after exposure, so you could have really short exposures and you wouldn't see the pictures, but you would chemically expose them with like gallic acid. So like we have now when we shoot film, or when we expose that film onto the paper.
He was the first to have a positive and a negative, right?
So when we expose that onto the paper, we can't see the image. We have to develop that image on the paper. And these were processes that were developed by Foxy and his friend Sir John Herschel, who...
I don't think that's going to stick.
Yeah. So do you think it's going to stick? So his friend John Herschel, the kind of scientist, he developed... hypersulfite of soda. Up until that point, it was really difficult to fix the images, and we wouldn't have them now. And that process and those chemicals are the same chemicals, pretty much, that we use today in darkroom printing. So, like from the 1840s all the way to now, we're still using the same chemicals with darkroom photography. We're still essentially using the same machinery,
logic. Same logic.
And it's a box with a hole in. Same processes, but it's
a refinement of the chemicals, but the same logical.
It's exactly the same. I mean,
even very mature technology, as they say in the industry.
Yeah, but absolutely.
But so, I think you should. There's a gap between your first episode and this one.
That's why you're here, man.
Thank you. But I don't think most people saw Daguerre. Most photographers never saw one, you know?
Mm.
I don't know if you guys saw the Daguerreotype in a museum or...
Oh, yeah, I've seen them, yeah.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's very different. It's because there's a glass behind the picture.
Yeah, and
reflecting the light. It's strange. It's kind of magical and mythical.
And if you're wearing, like, black, you can't actually see the image.
And the Calotype is the opposite. It's bland.
Yeah.
It's a paper.
It is paper. But the famous image of the open door, they said that it was much better at shadows and light and gradations between shadows and light, and it had a more artistic flavour than the kind of cold daguerreotype.
It was more fine art.
It was more fine art, absolutely. I used to be a fine art photographer.
Foxy, fine art photographer.
Well, going from... I worked in a professional lab for a couple of years, and one of the things that was one of the concepts you had to explain to people was people would come in and they would bring slides and positives, and going from a positive when you see it on a light box to a print, how dead that looked, and how even with the Ilford Cibachrome process,
right? Yeah.
You know, that was very silver heavy. You could get beautiful colors, and it would have a nice quality to it. But when you see something backlit, as we do on a screen every day, but back then just seeing it on a light box, when you see it on a print, and like João mentioned, it's that sensation of it being very dead. I think absolutely.
That was Fred Herzog used to his images were only ever shown as projections.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't.
And I think, did William Eggleston not do the same thing until a specific type of printing came along that he could actually print the colours that he wanted to see?
Yeah, I know that in the late 70s and early 80s, most of the conceptual or postmodern photographers like Jeff Wall and the other group of New York, they loved the projections, the light boxes. They loved that because it was related to, how do you say in English, those commercial ads of Marlboro and the cigarettes.
Oh right, yeah, like billboards.
Yeah, had the
billboards.
drama
Yeah,
too.
billboards. Yeah, the light boxing billboards. I don't remember Agassiz doing the same, but I think he loved pigment prints.
Yeah, pigment.
Is
prints.
it pigment?
All right, we'll have to look into that. I can't remember. Is it?
I know that
a specific type of printing that he could actually manipulate the colors a whole lot more.
There's a famous printer still doing that, Stein. I think it's Stein.
Where at?
He hangs with Mike Johnston of the Online Photographer.
All right, okay.
And he's a great printer, but it's very expensive, very difficult.
It is a very expensive
slow
process. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll put information to that in the notes. Just to kind of wrap up a little bit as far as the daguerreotype stroke calotype processes are concerned, it's Fox Talbot found it difficult to hold on to his paintings as far as the calotype was concerned. And people were always trying to circumvent those paintings, which aided the development of other types of photography, which kind of brought about
he didn't have the cloud system.
The cloud system,
like Adobe.
No. But it was only valid in the UK as well. So there was guys in Scotland, very famous calotypists, would you call them?
Yeah.
David Octavius Hill and Robert Adams in Scotland were kind of at the top of their game as portrait photographers, and on the other side of the pond in Boston, you had Albert Sands Southworth and Josiah Johnson Hawes, Southworth and Hawes, which were daguerreotypists. And once everybody, the amount, it was a really industrious thing, and everybody's doing it, so it brought the price down. So you could basically get them for like pennies, not really pennies, but
he was asking 300 annual fee, right?
Right.
For professionals, and for amateurs it was around 10. I don't.
Right.
Was it pounds? No.
I think they were using. That was the original use of Bitcoin.
Who? Are we on about Hill and Adamson?
Talbot was asking for a fee in the
early
days.
Yeah.
But because the Talbot process was so high class compared to Daguerre, he was asking 10 for a monthly fee to amateurs,
right? Okay.
And 300 for professionals. So the professionals had to pay
more money,
much higher fees than the amateur.
Right. Okay.
And that at the time didn't make sense. Right. Even today, I don't know if it makes sense. But
well, no one makes more money than a professional photographer.
Yeah, I know. Especially in those days.
Yeah. But anyway, so we had these kind of different portrait photographers who had their own ideas, and I think that they started to look at it as more of an art form. So there was an ideology behind it. It wasn't just a recording of the scene in front of them. Obviously, artistic was ideological. There was a philosophy behind it. So these guys were able to keep their prices relatively high when crashing down around them. And I suppose that is prevalent in photography today, that if you really have vision and you really have an understanding of what you're doing, then you can charge more than the person who has a camera who's just pushing a button, so to speak.
Yeah.
You would like to think so, wouldn't you, Bradley?
Unless you're in a networking group, and then you can oversell yourself.
Bradley sent me a message the other day. He got burned. Yeah. Well, okay. We won't talk about that if you don't want to.
No.
No. Okay. Right.
No, it's funny that I have no idea how often that happens, but this person just randomly volunteered that they chose someone who'd been photographing about a year instead of me, and they're like, well,
you are clearly not good enough, Bradley.
No, I've been at it for 18 years, and I think maybe in another 18, I'll feel a little more comfortable.
All right.
Yeah, cool. I still don't believe you. your age, Bradley. So
he is. He doesn't look a day over 52.
no, at all.
I'm 15. I'm just dyslexic.
Yeah, right on, man.
So,
okay, right.
There was one more technical thing that I think we didn't really talk about with the Calotype. That one of the differences was that Talbot used a different silver salt, silver iodide instead of silver chloride, and the process of printing apparently was not as sharp. It wasn't pin sharp like the metallic.
It was fuzzy. Fuzziness. There was a fuzziness.
Paper fibers were blurring the image.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's funny now when you think about this. This is the next logical step in the evolutionary chain. You know, whether you want to debate whether digital versus film in terms of sharpness, but people are so obsessed with sharpness, and one of the diseases that I see is over sharpening and just being obsessed with sharpness as the ultimate characteristic, and it's so far down the chain.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's how the industry and manufacturers sell their gear. It's sharper, there are more pixels, it's brighter,
and let's be clear about one thing. Human nature, we love to pursue the impossible.
Yeah.
We want new things. We want to discuss things. We don't have patience.
Yeah.
I mentioned that to my son yesterday. We was taking a photography class, and I said, I just want you to know, if you haven't figured it out already, most things don't do what they say they'll do, and everybody is trying to sell you shit. Yeah. So you mix those two things together, and you will always be, the companies want you in a perpetual state of desire.
Indeed.
And that's largely been successful. You know, when you think about, I don't want to get off on a film and digital thing, but with if you have a Leica built in the 30s, 40s, or 50s, you can still use it. All the manufacturing advances back then were, you know, very slow, like adding automation and things like that. And the main advances were in the film, which is sort of, we could think of that almost like
even in film
today.
It was slow.
Yeah, exactly. And now,
how many years did Kodak take to push Kodachrome from 25 to 64 to 100? It was decades, right?
I don't know the interval, but yeah, it was quite a while. And even they didn't come out with, you know, silver reduced films like T-Max until the 80s. But that's a whole other.
That's episode. A whole other thing.
No. That's a good. But that's a good discussion, because in the early days of photography, the process were killed because of sensitivity. You guys talk about the neck clamp of Daguerreotype.
Yeah.
That was a killer for that process, because when Kodak appeared, you just press the button and we do the rest.
You press the button and we do the rest. Indeed.
We need to reintroduce the neck brace.
Yeah, but
because people like things that are retro, you come up with something like an ISO 1 or ISO 2 camera that only shoots at f/64, and then you have to be slow. You have to sit still.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting pictures. You know? All right, okay. We can wrap up on the bits of history stuff. Where we're going to go next week, I'm not quite sure. We'll probably start. I don't know. We'll talk about other processes that were derived from.
You guys should talk about salt papers.
Salt papers. Okay.
I feel like we should first introduce our guest.
Well, I was just going to get on with that, but he keeps bringing up things that we should talk about.
Are you talking about Foxy? Foxy Talbot.
Is that what people call you too?
No.
It's Foxy Medeiros. Okay, so we have Joao de Medeiros. I've known Joao a while. We've had plenty of conversations about photography, and when I think we first got, you sent me a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Because you were a gentleman.
Oh, thank you very much, man.
You sent me a very polite and warming comment about my work.
Okay, it deserves it. I think your work has there's a calmness to it, a stillness to it, and it's full of purpose. And that, getting to know you, I understand exactly where that comes from. You have an understanding of what photography is, and you have an acute understanding of what it is you want to capture and how you want to do that. You know, and that comes through in your pictures, man. And just like, they're really cool. I like them a lot.
I'm taking notes. This is going to the about page.
You can rewrite your bio.
Yeah. Okay, that's you can't use them. Okay, yeah. Nice things people have said about me.
No, you know how harsh this market is and how vain our colleagues are, and you were the first guy to be humble and to be very kind. And I just took the gesture and replied in the same form.
Cool, thanks, man. Did I send you a print?
Yeah, you did.
All right, cool, that's good.
The old lady with the...
It's a hairdryer?
It's already a classic. Yeah, absolutely. So, you are from Portugal?
Porto, Portugal. Yeah,
absolutely. And shoot weddings.
Yeah, I'm a lucky guy. I live by photography. Yeah. I consider myself a lucky guy. I think we are all lucky guys because we make a living out of photography, especially nowadays. I think it was not easier in the 60s or in the 50s, but it was more limited, less democratic.
Yeah, okay.
Nowadays, it's everyone is a photographer, but we know there are different definitions of photographers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
My kids take photographs, but it's not the same thing as a photographer.
Absolutely.
I don't know how to present myself, but I think that's a good way to present myself, a lucky guy.
Okay, cool. So why weddings?
Why not?
Okay, fair enough.
Really?
And that's all for this week.
All right, peace out.
No. I think it's very difficult to make a living in the streets now, especially with the current political mood, the social problems we have today. And weddings I think it's the new social thing, you know. If you have a vision, you can really, really express yourself in the social events, be it weddings, be it I don't know, parties, birthdays,
events,
whatever. Yeah, events, events, social events. And I was teaching visual arts in public schools, and I think it's global. Teachers make a lousy pay.
Yeah.
And I wanted to start a family, so wedding photography was the logical step.
But
you control my life and control my
you do
work.
it in your own way. It's kind of this is the way that I do it, and you haven't
that was my perspective. I know that people don't have that perspective, but I didn't saw any rule book.
Mm-hmm.
So why not take one lens and one camera and try to do something about it?
So what was the first thing that you learned when going from that acceptance of, okay, I'm photographed, without the mechanics of, you know, how did you get your first gig? Because I think that's a fascinating story from most people. But when you were shooting your first wedding, what kind of things were going on in your mind? Like what, because I was sort of, you know, that mix of the newness and the horror and the excitement and the fun and the positive and negative are all merging at once. And because you're kind of overwhelmed by the process, and then as you get older and more experienced, that stuff all dies down, and then you focus exclusively on the social interaction and, you know, how you approach the wedding. And I think the three of us have, you know, in a Venn diagram, we would have a lot of overlap with the way we approach things, but I think we all have our own
very different
perspective. And, I know you like to work. I think we all came from a film background, but I came also like you, like from a manual focus, manual advance, no meter, a very methodical approach. And I think that's something that you still stick with. Is that something that you felt was a very positive thing from the first wedding on?
Yeah, I think it comes down to your background. And I had a background in arts and photography, so it was not scary for me. The technical things. Doing a daguerre is scary, you know.
Yeah.
Doing a albumin, how do you say?
Albumin.
Albumin.
Yeah.
I did that stuff. That's scary. That's difficult to photograph in large format and trying to print in alternative process. When I tried to do weddings, it was not a surprise for me because I was born in a very Catholic country. Portugal and Spain are like more Catholic than the Vatican, you know.
Yeah.
So we
There's
have
a bumper sticker.
More Catholic than the Vatican.
Welcome to Portugal.
Yeah, if you come to my city, to where I was born, there's a lot of big churches, lots of gold, you know, the whole stuff you see in the movies. And when I did a wedding, it was the typical Catholic wedding, so it was no surprises there. I knew what was going to happen. I had a camera with me.
And you know how to use it.
Yeah, because I was working in, how do you say? I was working with big companies doing reportage with corporate meetings.
Right. Yeah.
How do you say? Those big meetings for shareholders and doctors.
Just corporate events.
Yeah, I did that. So a wedding was more cliche, if you wanted.
Right. Yeah.
More trivial.
But there's this thing that also you have an understanding of how the equipment works, and you have an understanding of what photography is, and you have a vision regarding what it is that you want to produce. So all three of us could be put into any situation and be able to make photographs. And like the amount of people who are it has to be into this controlled situation. I think that's the problem with weddings as well, and all of the posts from photographers complaining about different aspects of the day that haven't gone their way, because as soon as they get out of their comfort zone a little bit, they don't understand enough about what it is that they're doing to be able to kind of work around that.
I can only speak on my own experience. So when I did my first wedding, I already knew the work of Cartier-Bresson, William Klein.
Yeah.
I knew the history of photography, so I knew that I was a bad photographer.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wasn't going to change the market or the industry. I was there to take pictures. Okay. If one of those pictures were good, cool. I had a good day. But I wasn't worried. And this was 12 years ago, maybe 2005, 4. So we were in the transition between film and digital. And digital was very bad.
Very right bad. At the beginning, it was terrible.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you guys remember the first APS sensors from Canon and Nikon.
It was the Canon D20, the first one, was it? Was it called the 20D or the D20?
Yeah.
But then they brought the D10 and then they brought the D20
out. Nikon had the D70.
Right, yeah. I can't remember what they're called, but
they were the first models below $1,000.
Right,
I think.
But these are kind of these are when we're getting into like digital SLRs, but the digital cameras before that were like it's like as big
even
as
the professional models I was given the first Canon 1D, and this was a $5,000 camera, and it was terrible.
Hey, it was TIFF. Do you remember the TIFF files?
TIFFs, yeah.
And that the rear LCD was the size of a postage stamp.
Yeah. How far we've come since the dark ages of photography.
The expectations were very low.
Yeah.
Very low.
Yeah.
I was just amazed that you could even see it on the back. Like the size of the LCD was so, because I was, when you're used to film, you don't look anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But I thought the whole
and clients back then only wanted the thing quickly. They wanted speed above quality.
Yeah.
I think we now have some degree of quality, but back then people were interested in the novelty, the digital thing, the iPods, the iPhone.
Yeah.
Things were starting to show up.
Did you get questions? I remember it was around 2005-ish when people would start asking, I need this to be digital because what if something happens to your film?
Yeah.
Like, that's never occurred in the 100 years prior.
People always ask me, what if the camera opens, the back of the camera opens?
What if I get hit on the head by a television?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, people had several doubts about film, and nowadays no one complains about that. It's the opposite, totally the opposite.
Yeah, definitely. And we have.
But I was not scared
progressed.
at all.
Yeah.
I was not.
Because you knew what the fuck you were doing.
Yeah, I think if you have a good background, if you have a good education or training, formal training, you know where to stay. Where
you know how to make
shoot.
Photographs in any situation. You can problem solve all situations. I suppose the bulk of photographers these days are just not learning that, and the industry
that's
and your
my point.
workshops.
I think most people don't know culture.
Yeah,
the culture behind the photography.
Well, isn't that the shortcut that you were trying to? I think that Ian talks about a lot. Is I think the real, not to put words in your mouth, but I think maybe the distaste that we have for most workshops is that it's an attempt to bypass experience by getting easy answers from someone who might be more interested in just selling you something than giving you actual answers. So
for sure.
You can't shortcut, like the newness of the things that were going on in my mind in my very first wedding were more about not what I was doing as much as like, finding a way to live up to my own expectations. Like, this is new to me. I want to deliver something that's going to make me happy and impress my clients.
Taste.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. You have to build taste. It's something that matures. It doesn't.
That's built also through understanding what you don't like.
Yeah.
And people kind of dismiss that part. They just go, I like that, that'll do. I think I've figured out what I want to do or how I want to do it by understanding what I'm not prepared to do and what I don't like. And it's kind of
I think it's whether it's hard to say whether it's good or bad as part of the digital process, but when photography, you learn a lot from your mistakes if you're paying attention.
Indeed.
You can the cycle of learning from those mistakes is abbreviated now because you see if you're off on a wrong process immediately. But I don't know if you're thinking as much about that mistake as you do when you're making an analog process, and I think that's one of the legitimate things that sort of then shortcut with digital.
Yeah,
everything easy, everything now.
It's all fast-paced,
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, Joao. After weddings, where do you see yourself? I don't know. Are you always going to shoot weddings until you finish, or do you have plans and ideas for other things?
No, I don't have any other projects or ideas. As long as I'm shooting, I'm happy,
Yeah.
I think photography is so precarious.
Yeah.
Is that the word? Being a photographer in the 21st century is very miserable, It's very difficult to make a living out of photography.
It is, yeah.
So if I can be like Bradley or even
be
go
65
further,
and still shooting weddings.
I'm not a day over 82.
Right, cool. All right then. So we don't go on and on and on and on for hours. Thanks, man.
Let me just reference an example. You guys know Elliot Erwitt?
Yeah. Absolutely.
He's still shooting.
Yeah.
It's people. Don't matter if it's a wedding or if it's a street in New York.
I love Elliot Erwitt
people.
as well. Elliot Erwitt is like he's hilarious. He's a comedian.
Yeah,
without a doubt, he's hilarious. His work is, I take a lot of inspiration from his work, and the fact that he is nobody apart from himself.
Exactly.
And that's it. I'm just going to do
his
my
book
thing.
Snaps is one of my favorite. I review that like once a year. It's brilliant.
Okay, if we can wrap that up and talk, is there anything that you've seen this week or, I don't know, recently that is driving you mad about the photography industry or some useless product? Bradley?
Well, I think I haven't seen any products recently that have pushed my buttons, but I think the thing that, with my coming from my experience, I've seen a number of fads come and go, and I won't relive them all. But the thing that I'm seeing a lot of now, mostly from what I assume are novices, but just vignetting images by like 2 or 3 stops where it looks like everything was shot from a toilet paper tube. It's like no one's noticing this. Like, to me, all I see is the vignette, and I think it's something that when you've done it a couple times, it's like it can be sort of addicting in the moment, but it looks terrible, and I think it's going to wear really poorly. And I think there are situations where it can draw attention to certain compositions, but as a blanket rule of doing it to everything, I think is just it's painful to watch, because I can't see the photograph anymore. All I see is the vignette.
It's like that over HDR'd HDR imagery that was popular in landscapes and stuff recent. Right,
and add selective color. If you had a black and white shot with a red color rose with a heavy vignette with an HDR sky.
Some people still ask me about that, when I'm away, and they go, "Oh, can you do the black and white with the?"
If you guys can do that with a tilt shift lens, you're kings.
Oh, what about there was free lensing? Did they used to call it free lensing?
Free lensing,
yeah. Wow, man, fucking rad. And there's I don't know whether it's still live, but there used to be a website, and it was kind of have like a weekly Schindler Award. And
really?
It was awful, like spot colouring, like work, and they'd call it a Schindler, so they get a Schindler Award.
One thing, this isn't a frustration, it's something that I actually want to plug. I haven't seen it in a while, but on Twitter, there was an account called Bitter Wedding Photographer, and it was brilliant. It was so funny. It was just like, if you could say out loud all of the frustrations that you have about any step of the process.
Yeah. Can I just add, though, that this podcast isn't a wedding photography podcast?
That's true. But that's just how we are. We happen to earn our living.
That's just how we are. That's where we are. That's what's going on. Okay, João, anything?
Yeah, I want to congratulate our colleague, Victor, from that award from Hasselblad.
Oh, Victor Hank. Yeah,
Victor Hank.
Yeah.
Hasselblad should take note of this podcast and sponsor it.
And bring back the X-Pan.
Yeah, Hasselblad.
Yeah, forget Nikon.
Are they working on a digital X-Pan?
No, but they have that
I hope
H1D. I think now you can adapt X-Pan lenses, and there's I think they're actually replicating. It's a 65 by 24 crop.
Yeah, but it's on the XD one. It's not the same thing.
All right, okay.
It's probably
no problem. Right,
yeah,
okay,
but congratulations, Victor.
Congratulations
great
too,
stuff.
Baby. Yes,
great,
absolutely.
Great work. Yeah. Great colleague. Great addition to the NPS.
I met him in Stockholm a couple of months back, but I was really, really pissed. So, like, somebody said to me, I was by the time you left the party, you were really drunk. I was like, I was fucking really drunk by the time I got there. Never mind by the time I left. And I vaguely remember bumping into Victor. But yeah, anyway, well done, Victor.
I don't know if I'm going to steal your distasteful product of the week, but Kodak with the coin.
Oh, Kodak Bitcoin stuff.
Kodak's Bitcoin.
I didn't read into it, but I saw it.
Yeah, they did. That was so weird.
Oh no, yeah, they're just a company.
They've made a series of bad decisions.
Just bad decision after bad decision, man. As I was saying last week, they should employ. I'd save them millions. I just go no, don't bother with the R&D. Don't bother, because it's not going to work. Right. So
I think they're selling our bags and T-shirts that remind you of the great things they used to make, like Kodachrome and. It's hilarious.
Ian, what's your product?
It's the Light L16 camera.
Okay.
No, it's not. That was last week. I just still think it's ridiculous. That's all.
It's 2 words worth.
Yeah, man. All right, hang on. I've got it. Okay, so introducing to the world the lens ball.
The what?
Oh God, that's not bad.
The lens ball.
You can also use it as a crystal ball if you're a fortune teller.
Fuck's sake. It literally is just a glass ball, It fits.
I bet it comes in a suede pouch.
Oh no, they released a video the other day. Do you know what? I've started re-following like Petapixel and SLR Lounge so I can get all the ridiculous products and things that happen in the industry so I can talk about them on a weekly basis. And I think about the lens ball. Oh, I don't know. Right, so basically it's a glass ball that you shoot through.
It's a real product?
Yeah. It's a real product.
It's a real product.
With all new Apple-esque packaging now. So they had like a packaging opening video, and basically it's just a fucking glass ball.
It reminds me of the pet rock from the 70s. They actually sold a rock that you could say was a pet, but it was just a rock, but it came in a box that said it was a pet, so therefore it's a pet.
It's a pet.
Oh, there's actually a Lens Ball Pro, which is a bigger version of the Lens Ball. You can get a bigger glass ball, and it's for everyone.
I get that.
I want one.
Check it out, man. It's going to turn your world upside down, literally.
What about price?
Price. The Lens Ball Pocket is $24.95. If you want the Lens Ball Pro, that's $34.95.
Ah, sorry. Okay.
It's not bad.
Not bad.
I'd be going for the Pro. You're getting more for your money.
As you're ordering, it probably pops up a thing that says, "Get the Pro, you deserve it."
Yeah.
There's a quality guarantee. No, anyway, whatever. Go and fucking read it about it yourselves. It's ridiculous. Is there anything else we'd like to add?
No?
Okay.
I think you touched all the bases.
Okay, cool. Right, where can people find you, Joao?
My name is difficult to write, so...
It'll all go in the show notes anyway.
Yeah, if you can share the links, that's cool. If not, don't worry.
Okay, right. Right, you can find Joao on our show notes. We'll put all the information of Instagram and websites and all of that kind of stuff. Bradley?
I'm on Twitter at Bradley Hansen. I'm on Facebook as Bradley Hansen Photography, and also on Instagram as Bradley Hansen Photography.
Cool. And people can find me at ian.
Yeah, check it out. Great work.
Great work by Bradley Hansen. Yeah, absolutely. It is. People can find me at ianweldon.com. Instagram, Ian J. Weldon. I have now shifted my wedding stuff to at Not Wedding Photography.
Yeah, don't forget to promote your workshop, man.
Well, yeah. And we're also, as Joao mentioned...
It's good. I love the poster. Great poster.
So,
is it yours?
Sorry?
That yellow photo, yellow background, is it yours?
Yeah.
Great photo.
Mine. Thank you very much. But we are, me and a friend of mine, Eduardo Marina, last year we ran a workshop that isn't a workshop near Rome, and we're doing the same again this year, and it's called I Am Not a Wedding Photographer. And we'll put details of that into the show notes too, so people can...
it's in April, right?
It is in April. It's April the 6th to the 10th, and it's a place near Rome. It's cool. We'll, but yeah, all the details, I'll talk about it more as we get closer. But as I said, what I don't want to do is have this podcast as me just promoting my podcast.
Nah, don't worry.
You can tell us, and then
I can tell you, and you can tell everybody else. Okay, but I am working on something else as well that should be coming at the end of the year. Find out more later. Stay tuned.
Wink, wink.
Wink, wink. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Our half-hour podcast this week has been 50 minutes. Spot on.
We try.
See you later, Joao.
Ciao.
See you later, Bradley.
Bye.